All right, everybody. This is Patrick Hiebert with Freedom Lovers Life podcast, number whatever it is at this point. And welcome to this one. I'm excited. We're going to get to talk with Bitcoin Way Tony Yazbeck, and he's a super expert on Bitcoin and all things Bitcoin education. And you know what? I think I'm also here with Erik, our COO, and Erik and I do a number of these podcasts together. So Erik's also Bitcoin tracker extraordinaire. So he's always got 1,000 graphs for us to look at on where Bitcoin's going. And so thought he'd be excellent for helping out with some of the questions for you, Tony. Tony, if you don't mind, maybe you can introduce the Bitcoin Way and yourself to the picture.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. So basically, I come from a background of cybersecurity of over 25 years and been in the Bitcoin space, for about a little over 8 years now. I came into Bitcoin. My story is well known by now. It's very public. I came into Bitcoin from a horror story when essentially the Lebanese banking system collapsed and stole everybody's life savings literally overnight. And so, when you survive something like this, you find Bitcoin. That's it. There's no going back to a broken legacy system, and your lens on the world changes entirely, which is in big part how the Bitcoin Way was formed. So our mission here really is about education and empowering folks to regain full control over their wealth, to teach them how to protect it, how to get it right the first time, so that, when the next collapse arrives, because as far as we're concerned, there's no if anymore. It's when it arrives. People have a choice at this point. You either become its victim, or you can become completely free. And the freedom comes by owning the one thing you, for the first time in history, are able to own, which is your time, your energy, your money, which is Bitcoin. And so because it comes from the world of tech, a lot of people fear it. They have an anxiety over the fact that maybe they're going to muck it up somehow and what have you, which are all valid concerns. So we're here to handhold everyone, no matter what the background is, into learning these new steps. It's not rocket science. It's just new. We walk you through it until you become as comfortable with self-custody as riding a bicycle. No matter what the amount of money that you're transacting with is, whether it's $100 or 100 million, the steps do not change. It's just making you familiar with what they are so that you're sleeping well at night, knowing that you and you alone are in full control of that wealth, and you are no longer dependent on any third party, no matter where you are located on this planet.
Thanks for that, Tony. It's a lot better introduction than I could have given for you, so I appreciate that. In our Veritas Village communities, we're super Bitcoin fans. We accept Bitcoin for purchases of land and payments for their home construction. We require that all the community commercial entities use Bitcoin, or at least accept Bitcoin, as well as whatever other currency they'd like to accept. We do a bit of mining with the solar system there, which is pretty cool. And a lot we have as a company. Our Autris parent company has a substantial amount of its cash holdings in Bitcoin. There's a Free Cities video of me going around recently from a podcast I did where I spoke about what I believe to be the collapse of the next empire, basically the Western world. And there's 4 or 5 steps that always happen when the British Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, Ottoman. Well, when they collapse, there's always the same things that happen. And the Western world, whether you want to say that's just the U.S. and Canada, or U.S. and Europe, is going through a lot of those same steps. So I kind of with you on it's only a matter of when, not if, and the timing is just the only question at this point. So as you know, we're building communities down in Latin America. You've been to Veritas Village, Coronado. It was great. Brought a bunch of people there. We appreciate that. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about the services, because I think there's a large Venn diagram overlap between our beliefs, right, and our philosophy on Bitcoin. And a lot of our customers in the Veritas Villages would probably be very interested in your services. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about what those services are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all our services adhere to the Bitcoin ethos, which is essentially the journey to full self-sovereignty. So we've broken them down into 3 categories. One is the money, making sure you're in full control of it, which is where the Bitcoin and self-custody comes in. Then we also have where the cybersecurity set of services, which protect your digital privacy. And then, of course, we have jurisdictional sovereignty, which is where projects like yourselves are a perfect fit so that people can actually vote with their time and feet and money to go to places, where they are actually valued as human beings, where they're no longer coerced by a criminal organization, overtaxed, and like harassed day in and day out for money that they have earned. So all of these three elements align with our mission here, and we guide people through them all, one step at a time in order to get them from point A to point fully free, fully sovereign. And again, that comes down to learning the skills about owning your money, because if you don't do that, none of this is possible if you're still dependent on a third party where you have to ask permission to use your own wealth. That is no longer an option. Before 2008, you can argue we had no choice. After 2008, I will argue you have no excuse. Anyone can learn this. It's not that hard. Master the skills, opt out, live free. It's that simple. There are people that can help you. We're a perfect example of this. We live on a Bitcoin standard. It can be done. It's not that difficult. There are jurisdictions around the world, like where you are located, that are welcoming folks with open arms to see what's possible, when you live fully sovereign. And so we align folks that we work with. We show them these options. Of course, we met face to face because we're also part of that whole, don't trust, verify. So we're a bit old school in that sense. We come face to face. We meet the people that we work with. We understand what they're about, what their values are, if they align with ours, and if it's a match, then the floodgates open and it's full force forwards in order to benefit every single person that we work with. And this is really what we're about. And we're very blessed to be working with tons of folks from all over the globe that reach out to us with questions from all directions. Everybody starts off with a little confusion, a little anxiety, but after we break it down into baby steps, everything somehow translates into plain English and everybody just gets it, which is what we want.
And we're seeing like you said, in this area, Erik and I are in our head office here in Panama City, as you can see in the background. And, Panama is becoming more and more Bitcoin friendly as well. You can now pay your city property taxes and things like that in Bitcoin, which would have been unheard of a few years ago. And so that's pretty exciting. They're making all sorts of moves. Obviously, El Salvador has been leading that rush. And, every time I'm in El Salvador, I'm loving it that I can buy a Big Mac or whatever with sats. So it's pretty cool. And, so I think we have certainly that alignment. We obviously are very bullish on the region that we're in here, and we're seeing a lot of that. When you mentioned the Lebanese banking collapse, it reminds me of what I predict for the Canadian system pretty soon. As you know, both Erik and I are Canadian and living down here in Panama and Panamanian residents now. And, the Canadians, unfortunately, just, a lot of people don't like what happened, but they reelected a government that's very authoritarian on the, basically socialist. And, when I was there, even my taxes were north of 60% when you added everything up. And then you start thinking about that. It's like, it's August, the end of August, before I'm not working for the government anymore. I'm starting to work for myself. Down here, obviously, if you set things up correctly, you can have a whopping 0% tax, which is quite amazing. And that means you can have a third of your income and still break even with what you would make in Canada. So I can see a lot of Canadians wanting to have your advice and things on how to move through the system. Can you give us maybe a little example of how you've helped someone and where they started and where they ended up? And I think people can kind of relate more to an example.
Of course. We all know Bitcoin comes from the world of tech and cybersecurity, and most people do not. So in order to remove that barrier of fear and anxiety, we translate all this complexity into plain English, and we walk you through all the geek stuff, so to speak. But before we do anything with anyone, the conversation always begins with an understanding of why you're here in the first place. We need to be sure that folks understand that Bitcoin is the future of money and not an investment that you're going to make more dollars or euros or any of that other worthless paper. You need to understand that Bitcoin is the first time in history that you can own your wealth because it exists outside the system. It was created to replace the system. It wasn't created to integrate into the legacy system or extend its lifeline. So there's a lot of narratives out there that sort of like muddle these waters, and we're here to always clarify them. Bitcoin is the store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account, all in one. But you cannot pick and choose which parts of it you prefer and let somebody else deal with the other parts. First and foremost, Bitcoin must be used as money. It is a currency. The first line of that white paper says Bitcoin is peer-to-peer electronic cash, which means there is zero connections to any third-party custodians. Full self-custody is the Bitcoin revolution. That fundamental fact must be understood if anyone's going to succeed in Bitcoin. And this is where we start with that education. Once that's out of the way, we do all the geek stuff with you. So we recommend the best of the hardware, the best of the software. All of these things we curate and test regularly in-house so that you don't have to do it. And then we handhold you over a video call just like this one, step by step over every little detail in order to get you from point A to point bulletproof in terms of the security over your funds. And then once that's accomplished, we help you move your Bitcoin from wherever it currently is into this new airtight setup. And that's what you start using going forward. So we help you master these skills so that at some point, like I said earlier, they become as normal as riding a bicycle. It's no big deal anymore.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm always preaching, use it like a currency, right? Everybody that I talk to is always, hodling. It's like, oh, it's 107,000, it's 111,000 now. It's like, stop comparing it to the US dollar. Are we seeing Bitcoin go up or are we seeing US dollar go down? What matters is what can you get with a Bitcoin or with a SAT, right? And so, that's why one of the reasons I really like I mentioned, El Salvador, and now Panama's coming that way too, where you can really just use it as a currency as it should be and stop thinking about it as, relative to another currency, French francs or whatever, some sort of other thing. So that's been pretty exciting here for us as well. And maybe you can talk a little bit about why you sort of aligned with us here in Panama and what your feelings are on this region.
Well, once I discovered Bitcoin and my whole lens on the world, was changed. We did a complete 180. I felt hope again for the first time when I discovered Bitcoin. Kind of considering everything I've been through, there was no light at the end of the tunnel for me until I stumbled upon that Andreas Antonopoulos video, which sort of made me smile for the first time and, led me down that rabbit hole. And fast forward all this time, here we are having this conversation. So after all of that broke out, I couldn't stay in Lebanon. It was like a rotten shithole that no person should be staying in. But I needed to go somewhere. And that somewhere, I didn't want it to be just a new location that risks putting me back in the same hellhole I just left. So I spent a long time studying all of these jurisdictions around the world to see what they're offering and what have you. And Panama, after a good 8 to 9 months of research, checked all the boxes. So for us, there were a lot of plus signs, one of them being that they don't force you to live in the country, to be part of the residency program, which is a huge plus for most folks that are not ready to just pack up and leave. The other thing, like you mentioned, is the territorial tax system. If your money doesn't come from the country, your legal tax rate in Panama is a big fat zero. They don't care. And as long as you're not going out of your way to break any legitimate rules, people will leave you alone. You can live a very happy, comfortable, free life, meeting super nice and super helpful people. There's a lot of the old traditions still, alive and kicking in Panama. The whole family life, religious life, all that good stuff is still found here. City life, for me, when I saw it for the first time, really blew my mind. I wasn't expecting it. And I think that's the same reaction of a lot of folks that come to Panama for the first time. They think it's what they've seen in the movies or heard in the papers. And when they land and they see it for the first time themselves, they're like, that's not what I was expecting. So I describe it, as a hybrid between, Miami, New York, and Vegas, but without the junk. Really nice, beautiful, clean city. And for folks that are more of the outdoorsy type, well, I call it a page out of a fairy tale because it is. You go out of the city, in the eco village where you guys are, building these, prosperous economies, it literally feels like a page out of a fairy tale. And those that travel, more to the Caribbean side of Panama, it's like a movie, right? So there's a lot of flavors here for practically every single person. And so when you combine that with the freedom of individuals, it becomes a no-brainer as far as we're concerned. So we base ourselves in Panama. People come here, they get a taste for it, they live here, they spend a week or two at first, it settles in, and then they're like, why am I going back? It doesn't make sense anymore, right? And then once that decision is solidified, well, they need a place to stay. So now, where do we buy? Do we rent? If we buy, where do we buy? And all these roads eventually led us to meet you guys, and we're very big fans of what you are building, which is, the whole sovereign lifestyle, living off grid. You have your own energy source, grow your own fruits and vegetables if you want, live amongst, a Bitcoin community, because I guess there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are buying into this eco village concept because it just fits into the entire ethos. A lot of beautiful lifelong friendships are formed almost immediately upon meeting folks for the first time. So there's a lot of good that is coming out of these interactions, and Bitcoin is I guess fueling all of it. Like the incentives are powering this whole thing. You own your money, you live free, surround yourself with like-minded individuals. What else can you ask for? You don't have to deal with governments. You don't have to deal with tyrants. You don't have to deal with bullshit anymore. And you are no longer abused as a human being. Because you mentioned earlier, coming from Canada, you were taxed 60%. If Canadians took 30 seconds to do that math, that means at 60%, you are working 7 months out of the free like an idiot for nothing, right?
Yeah.
So why would you willingly subject yourself to that kind of abuse? Now, some people might argue, well, I make enough that even with that 60%, I can still buy my stuff. But you're missing the whole point, right? Like you are literally tax cattle for a government that just doesn't care about you. Whether you live or die, it makes no difference. So why spend that time and energy in a place that doesn't deserve you? The Canadian government doesn't represent the Canadian people in the same way that the US government doesn't represent the American people. Canadian people, I know a lot of them, some of the most amazing people that I've ever met. But then you meet the Canadian government and they're like, how are these two connected in the same land? You know,
Point.
like it's like one is black and one is white. How are they mixing? So it's very sad to see, especially with the latest elections, like you kicked one idiot out and you put an even bigger one right back in. Like you can't
A
make
more dangerous idiot.
you can't make this stuff up even if you wanted to, right? So there's certain things that are still very confusing to me, and at some point I stopped trying to decipher these mysteries and I just like accept it the way it is. I suppose everybody's journey will lead them to where it has to lead them for them to learn the lessons that they have to learn. I was comfortable before my collapse. Like, if it didn't happen, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. I wouldn't be at the Bitcoin way doing what I'm doing. Like, in hindsight, everything happens for a reason. And usually, the hardest lessons, the most painful experiences you ever go through are the ones that actually push you to make the change that you have to do. And so I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are going to have to go through their own version of the Lebanese collapse before that light bulb finally clicks in their head. Thankfully, we are reaching or able to reach through education and consistent messaging a lot more folks before that happens. And this is the traffic, that, we work with on a daily basis, that, we redirect toward you guys for those that are looking, to establish a more permanent location in a jurisdiction that, they're going to call home at some point. And so all of these little options, they matter. But we study them like in depth. Every little detail matters because, like you're rebuilding someone's life. There's no room to be flippant about any of this stuff. It has to be perfect each and every, step of the way. And that's what we try doing here on a regular basis.
Tony, I'm excited to introduce you to our viewers because since they're already freedom oriented, they're a little bit into Bitcoin, but what's something that is a common blind spot for people that think they're Bitcoiners, but they haven't plunged all the way in? Is there like you meet thousands of people, so after a while you must start seeing these common blind spots.
Of course, there's a lot of people that still measure their Bitcoin wealth with dollars or euros or other fiat currencies. That is a mistake. But at the same time, it's like almost expected that that's your first reaction because your whole life you've been calculating in dollars and euros. So, you're going to naturally keep looking at that number on the screen and be happy when it goes up and like panic when it goes down. That is the worst thing you can do because Bitcoin cannot be measured in a currency that is the complete antithesis of Bitcoin. One currency, the fiat currency, was created to steal from you. So it's continuously, infinitely inflationary. And the other one was created to empower you, to give you back your time and energy. And it's deflationary. So how are you calculating it? You can't. If you wait a long enough period of time, Bitcoin's value is going to go up anyhow. So if you're happy at 100,000 or whatever it is right now, I can tell you that it's going to be worth 107 million or billion and trillion because the dollar is going to be worth zero. So the higher the dollar amount is because its purchasing power has gone down. It's not because all of a sudden you're a billionaire and should be celebrating. It's because you're a billionaire in toilet paper, like the Lebanese people. If you go to Lebanon right now, anybody's a billionaire. It takes like $1,000 and you can call yourself a billionaire. But what can you buy with that? You can barely buy toilet paper. So don't celebrate.
Is there some technical mistakes that people are as newbies to Bitcoin? Is there some technical mistakes that they're doing in their procedure?
As far as technical mistakes, yes. There's a lot of products that are out there, that do Bitcoin, but not the way it's intended. So we're very strict about the criteria for these products. We only focus and recommend on open source or verifiable source, Bitcoin only, fully air-gapped devices when it comes to the cold card. So that means the device itself will never touch a computer. Mm-hmm. So products that have a cord or USB key and all that, we don't touch. We don't even talk about. Even though there may not necessarily be a problem with them right now, we don't take that chance that in 6 months, 6 years, something unexpected happens. We don't need to worry about this because it's never going to touch a computer. And because we come from cybersecurity backgrounds, we deploy a lot of advanced configurations to all of these setups to account for extreme scenarios that most people don't even think of. So we account for them, but more importantly, we train every individual to become familiar with them. Like in the event of X, what do you do? In the event of Y, what do you do? The last thing you want to do is freak out or panic. And this is why we go through thorough training in very simplistic form so that you don't need to freak out. You know exactly what to do, under the most extreme scenarios, which hopefully you will never encounter. And at the same time, we establish private signal groups with everyone that we work with. So basically, they're in touch with us 24/7. Any comments, questions you have, you can drop them in there. That does two things. One, it eliminates anxiety almost automatically because you're connected to us, at moment's notice. And two, if there's anything important going on in the world that you need to know about, well, we will notify you immediately via that same group. So you are always up to date with anything that's relevant to you. So that establishes a very strong bond between us and every individual that we work with for whatever they need, throughout this journey. So we curate the products, the hardware, the software, the setup. And you'd be hard pressed to meet a more OCD team than us at the Bitcoin Way. Because I'm the type of individual that will update or fine tune something every 20 minutes if I can. And I will push out the recommendation to everybody as to why we should do this. So you can be sure that as soon as something good comes out or something better that we've already done, you will know about it. And, we will guide you through the whole upgrade, whatever the case may be. Because for us, Bitcoin has already won. In my head, Bitcoin already is the future of money. It already is the world reserve currency. There is zero doubt in my mind this is what's going to happen. And so we approach it with that mindset. I'm not setting up Bitcoin as an afternoon project or a side hobby. For us, we are training you to become Navy SEAL head of security, so to speak, because as the value of Bitcoin appreciates, and it will much faster than you realize, the attempts to steal it are going to increase along with it. And if you're flippant, lazy, complacent, well, then you're introducing counterparty risk, which is completely avoidable just with a little bit of common sense and discipline. And we make sure everybody does this. At least those that continue on this journey with us are always informed. And so we don't allow silly mistakes. We get silly questions, expect it. That's cool. There's no stupid questions during any of our conversations. However, we do point it out when it's not a good idea. And we will not engage with anyone who insists on a bad idea. Because nobody needs an unhappy ending. If you're not going to do it right, do it on your own. We're not getting involved. If you're going to do it right, we will help you with that process, because there's no gray zone when it comes to Bitcoin. It needs to be done properly the first time. Otherwise, if you lose the money, everybody knows it's a one-way street. That's why the margin of, making errors is almost zero as far as we're concerned. And again, none of this is rocket science. It's just something very new that a lot of people have never seen before, because we've never had the opportunity to see it before. Before Bitcoin, all the money was in a bank or with a third-party custodian. Now, you have to shatter that mindset. You have to stop thinking as fiat as money, because it's not. It's worthless garbage. But, we've been conditioned to think it has value, and too many people still accept it. That's why you can still go down the street and pay with things with money, because the education has not gone mainstream yet. And unfortunately, the wrong people today understand this. Governments, institutions, all these guys, they know what we know. And I can tell you with also almost 100% certainty, they don't like it, even though they embrace Bitcoin. I've said this on many podcasts. Governments will not attack Bitcoin head on because they will lose. They've already tried it in the past and failed spectacularly. But how do they attack it? They embrace it, but they try to lure you into their version of it. The ETFs, the Bitcoin treasuries, the borrowing against the Bitcoin, all that fiat garbage, the traps to separate you from your Bitcoin, right? All of this is happening. It's very clear, because the one thing they never talk about is self-custody, which is the only thing that matters in Bitcoin. It is the only way 8 billion people win at Bitcoin. It's not by trusting third party, whether it's collaborative custody, whether it's in a Bitcoin treasury, whether it's an ETF. All of that is worthless risk, counterparty risk that you're introducing for no logical reason. There is no win in this for most people. If you think you're smarter and you want to gamble and maybe aim to get a win and you get lucky, congratulations. 99% of people will not. They will get tracked, lose their funds, and call Bitcoin the scam. There's no scam. You thought you thought you were going to beat the house. You didn't. That's what happened. And so that's, again, where the education comes in. We try to, be like sort of the platform of truth here, to really open your eyes. Don't get attracted by these worthless, shiny objects. They are just traps to separate you from the one asset that can literally change your life. It was created for that purpose. Bitcoin in full self-custody. That's it.
Sounds like a good wake-up call for us and our clients.
For everybody. I mean, I have a friend here in Panama that went about a year so far, I guess, but only using Bitcoin and very much thinking like you were talking about too. And he found grocery stores that would accept Bitcoin and everything, even in the past. So, but very much on the self-custody side. Obviously, we are as well. Cold wallets, and the ETFs make me nervous because, is there actually any Bitcoin owned behind them? Do they have to prove that they have them? And who knows? When that goes down, who keeps the Bitcoin they do have? But anyway, we try to keep our podcast pretty short. You had a lot of information for people in there already. I really appreciate it. We'll probably do this again in the future. Maybe you have a August visit to come see us, right? And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yes. We will come and visit you sometime at some point in August. We'll introduce you to a lot of folks that we've met that are onboarding, coming to Panama to potentially stay there. And we want to connect them with, good people, good locations for them to rebuild their lives in a way where they're in full control of it, surrounded by like-minded individuals, and really a location where their mental health will no longer be bombarded by this toxic negativity that they're leaving behind in their own home countries, wherever that may be. And so it's very important for us, that we build these circular economies and we push the adoption of Bitcoin into more jurisdictions, more cities. Like, for example, when I walk into a store, the first thing I ask them, do you accept Bitcoin yet? Right? And so that yet makes the whole difference, because they're going to ask you, they're going to tell you no, most of them, and then they're going to wonder why you're asking. And so I tell them, oh, well, you should consider it because your neighbor down the street here, they already accept it. And so, you want to get them thinking of Bitcoin as money more and more and as quickly as possible, because not everyone can own Bitcoin. Like the owning the UTXO, the whole, hodling, I'd say maybe 3% of the global population is fortunate enough to do it. Like, consider yourself really blessed and lucky if you're able to buy Bitcoin and hold it in a cold wallet. Most people will not be able to do this. But 8 billion people can use it as money. That is why the medium of exchange is always, as far as I'm concerned, more valuable than the store of value. Because without the medium of exchange, there is no value. You have to keep that in mind. Don't fall for the government narratives. Hold your Bitcoin, never sell it, all that foolishness. Has to be used as money. Otherwise, there is no value to hold, right? So that's where the truth, the real education needs to be pushed out. The whole decentralization and strength of Bitcoin, the whole premise of its power are the nodes, people running nodes, which is something we push every Bitcoiner to run, and its use as money. Have that in place, all three elements of Bitcoin appreciate to infinity. And it's exactly what's starting to happen. That's why Bitcoin is winning. That's why the global adoption is happening. But we need to be sure people don't fall back to bad habits. ETFs, Bitcoin treasuries, all of that rubbish, you have to forget about, because that's all tied into a corrupt system that is designed to steal from you. And sooner or later, it will blow up in your face. So just avoid it to begin with.
All right, well, thanks again very much, Tony. We'll put how to contact you and your team in the description here below, and we'll get everybody coming to you for advice, I'm sure, and probably including us. You can improve the way we handle Bitcoin as well. So we'll continue to make those
We offer a
thoughts.
30-minute complimentary call to anyone who just wants to reach out, say hello, find out, ask questions. Everybody's welcome.
That's awesome. That's very generous of your time. And you probably get a lot of those 30-minute calls. So that's great.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Happy to get on them whenever possible.
And I definitely appreciate that you're coming to see us again in August. Looking forward to that. And I try to do my best to make sure I'm around when you guys are here. August is a busy month for us as well. And we just acquired a really big property in Atenas, Costa Rica, which is a next Veritas Village that we're going to make. So we're going to try to orange pill the heck out of Costa Rica as well. So
let's go for it, man. The more, the merrier.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, Tony. I really appreciate your time, and
My pleasure,
talk again
guys.
soon.
Happy to be here with you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you, Tom.